Hey there guys, this is Richard, your host. Sony's PlayStation consoles have been the pioneers of console gaming for generations, and their latest console, the PlayStation 5, is a testament to that. Games like God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, and Ghost of Tsushima have truly brought the next generation of console gaming into our homes. Today, we'll go back to where it all began, all the way to 1994, when the first PlayStation debuted in Japan. Here's our list of the top 30 graphically impressive PlayStation 1 games that were way ahead of their time. Quick disclaimer, this is not a ranked list, so it doesn't matter where your favorite PS1 title might land, we think it's great anyway. Before we begin, why not hit that nice shiny subscribe button? Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver, 1999. First up, we have Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver. This third-person action-adventure, developed by Crystal Dynamics, tossed players into a fantastical realm of magic, vampires, and interdimensional travel. This is a sequel to Blood Omen, Legacy of Kain, which came out in 1996. You play as Raziel, a vampire-turned-wraith who's cast to death by none other than Kain, the protagonist of the first game. The gameplay has the player phase between two planes, the material and the physical realm. Each has its unique vibe and dangers too. And of course, there are puzzles that require to shift between the realms to progress. Coming to the visuals, Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver is an atmospheric masterpiece. From the murky hallways of Melkir Castle to the gothic cathedrals of Pain, the game ensures the player is lost in a dark, gritty, and alluring world of guts and gore. Resident Evil 2, 1998. Speaking of guts and gore, what better place to set the tone for a gritty horror experience than Capcom's Resident Evil 2? Released in 1998, this game is still hailed as one of the best in the long-running franchise. It even got a remake in 2019, which hit the top of the charts yet again. But let's talk about the OG here. Resident Evil 2 is set a few years after the T-virus outbreak in Raccoon City. Players can choose between two characters, Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield. Whichever character you choose the first time around, your actions have consequences when you play as the other character for the second playthrough. Visually, the game was a major improvement from its first title back in 1996. Improved polygon count, head tracking effects for all characters, and a visual character injury system make the game incredibly immersive. The static camera was still a turn-off for many, but hey, who wants to look away when the hallways are so pretty? Crash Bandicoot Warped, 1998. Stepping away from the dark and gritty, the next title on our list is Dog's Crash Bandicoot Warped. Naughty Dog released this title in 1998, which was the third title in the Crash Bandicoot series. As the name suggests, the story this time is all about time travel. Crash and his sister have to slide, jump and spin their way through various stages while fighting major villains like Dr. Neo Cortex and Uka Uka. Often known as PlayStation's first mascot, the third game in the Crash Bandicoot series won fans worldwide. The game has a bright and cartoony vibe overall, which fits the theme here perfectly. The landscapes are gorgeous, the character models are vibrant, and the smooth frame rate really does wonders for such a fast-paced platformer. We have to mention the amazing lighting as well. Blurry textures? Smart lighting to the rescue. Tekken 3, 1997. Up next on the list is Namco's legendary fighting game, Tekken 3. Often hailed as the best fighting game to hit PlayStation 1, this 1997 title improved all of its previous technical aspects, and then some. Tekken 3 is a fighting game where the players can choose from a large roster of characters that fit their playstyle and aesthetic. Although the controls seem simple, with two face buttons mapped to punches and kicks, respectively, the intricate combos that can be pulled off are not easy to master. Visually, Namco pushed the PlayStation console's hardware to the limits with Tekken 3. Although the backgrounds are still simple 2D, the characters themselves are much more detailed and fluid when compared to their earlier arcade machine counterparts. Yeah, clunky animations are noticeable sometimes, but that never ruins the overall experience of this well-rounded fighter. And the FMV cinematics that show up at the end of each character's campaigns are an absolute delight. The level of detail in these animations was just a tiny glimpse at the fantastic cinematics in the years to come. Tekken 3 remains one of the pioneers of the fighting genre to date. Spyro the Dragon, 1998. Here's a lesser-known title that was a visual delight on the PlayStation 1. Spyro the Dragon. Insomniac Games released this title in 1998, and it became a bestseller a year after, with almost 5 million copies sold worldwide. Aimed toward a younger demographic to rival Nintendo, Spyro the Dragon was a magical, open-ended fantasy platformer. You play as, Spyro the Dragon. The evil, nasty Nork has taken over the Dragon Kingdoms by imprisoning dragons within crystals. Your mission? Scorch, jump, glide, and head headbutt your way across a set of shifting stages, collecting various items along the way. The items range from stolen dragon eggs to dragons stuck in crystals. Alex Hastings developed a 3D panoramic engine, which allowed the game to use LOD for the first time. In simple terms, this allowed the developers to show far-off objects with variable levels of detail for much more stable performance and frame rate. This paved the way for a smart rendering solution, which gave a more open-world feel to this platformer. In fact, if you start high enough, you can glide across an entire level seamlessly. Now, that's impressive. Alien Resurrection, 2000. Now, let's dive headfirst, or rather, gun first, into the world of first-person shooters. Developed by Argonaut Games, this horror FPS was an instant hit when it came out for the PlayStation back in 2000. Thanks to the 1997 blockbuster movie with the same name, gamers needed no introduction to the franchise. You play as Lieutenant Ellen Ripley, stranded aboard the USM Auriga spacecraft, but you're alone. Swarms of the vicious predatory alien race known as xenomorphs are out there, and they're out for blood. Armed with a roster of weapons and gadgets, you have to face the predators and make it out of the nightmare alive. After a strew of developmental hiccups and delays, the game finally came out and impressed players worldwide. The dank, dimly lit corridors of the space station set the perfect tone for the horrors lurking around every corner, literally. The xenomorphs scurry across walls and ceilings with impressive and, frankly, terrifying smoothness and agility. This made every encounter tense, and surviving them satisfying. The play on lights was done beautifully, flickering at just the right times to give you a glimpse of a xenomorph's tail flitting across. This one is definitely up there when it comes to pure atmosphere. Metal Gear Solid, 1998. It's time for one of our all-time favorites, Metal Gear Solid. Konami's first title in this revered franchise revolutionized the tactical stealth genre back in 1998. You take control of Solid Snake and must infiltrate and neutralize a terrorist threat from Foxhound, a rogue special forces unit. The gameplay requires you to maneuver around soldiers and threats by using various tools of espionage, along with the infamous cardboard box. There are also sequential firefights which add to the overall action hero fantasy. Now, let's talk about the visuals. I have to mention the in-engine cinematics first. The cutscenes in the game are all rendered using the in-game engine and even fully voice-acted. This might not seem like a big deal today, but back then, it was absolutely mind-boggling. Hideo Kojima and the team decided to give the game a 2D control style, but with 3D graphics to create a unique and more user-friendly experience. Kojima even used Lego to build and simulate the top-down view we see in the game. Fun fact, the ninja cloaking effect in the game was actually the result of a bug that the devs decided to turn into a feature. Yes, I'm looking at you, Bethesda. Silent Hill, 1999. The next title on the list probably takes the crown for being the most atmospheric horror experience of its time. Released in 1999 by Konami, the player follows Harry Mason, who has to find his daughter in a creepy and not-so-deserted town named, you guessed it, Silent Hill. The game focuses more on exploration and puzzle solving, as combat is used only as a last resort against the numerous horrors the game throws at you. The faceless nurses are still nightmare fuel 2 decades later. That, mixed with psychological horror elements merging with reality, makes it the horror masterpiece that it is. As for the visuals, Silent Hill is a prime example of using the environment to overcome hardware limitations. The usage of fog and mist especially limited the visibility of the players, but in a good way. It added to the tension of the experience, making the players fear every step they take. This, paired with the nasty set pieces the player travels through, and of course, the grotesque other world, makes it an absolute gem in the visual horror genre. Xenogears, 1998. Up next, we have Xenogears by developer Square. Yep, the same devs that later combined with Enix and became Square Enix. This 1998 RPG has a fan following for various reasons. The game has emotional storytelling, complex characters, and, of course, great combat. This is the first turn-based combat game on our list. You play Fei Fong Wong, a person suffering from amnesia, entangled in a conflict that's been going on for generations. Oh, did we mention mechs? Yeah, there are also mechs, called Gears. Like many other games of that generation, Xenogears used 2D sprite-based characters on pre-rendered 3D backgrounds. This allowed them to reduce hardware load and make things much more interactable in the forefront. But the noteworthy visual quality is not that of the environment, but of the gears. These mechs had impressive details, and this didn't diminish even during the large-scale battles. The game played around with dynamic camera angles, which just worked. A mix of 2D and 3D pre-rendered cutscenes was a great medium to convey the complex story, and was responsible for making it so much more than a mech-smashing simulator. Wipeout 3, 1999. The memories. We should probably talk about Wipeout 3 in 3 times speed and while sitting upside down. Because that's exactly what playing this 1999 arcade sci-fi space racer feels like. Where this game lacks in storytelling, it makes up for electrifying gameplay. Just pick a vehicle from the available roster, hold onto your controller, and try not to fly off the rails. Literally. And if that's not enough, just hop in some multiplayer for some breakneck speed races against another player. While you're at it, why not use futuristic weapons as well? As if things weren't chaotic enough already. Visually, the game absolutely nails the cyberpunk vibe, from the neon-lit tracks to the sleek, stylish hovercrafts, and even the sci-fi user interface. You truly are transported to a hyper-futuristic world at, oh man, this is too fast, miles per hour. And the track variety is commendable as well, from snowy landscapes to sprawling cities. Wipeout 3 is the perfect game if you want to switch off and zone into reflex mode. Trust me, you're going to need it. Quake 2, 1997. Another trip down memory lane. Quake 2, released in 1997, is often praised for revolutionizing the first-person shooter genre, especially with its multiplayer mode. As for the story, the alien race known as Strogg is trying to invade planet Earth. How does one stop the invasion? Simple. Send in a lone marine with, and yeah, that's pretty much it. As the player, you'll traverse various stages and blow hordes of enemies to smithereens. Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Well, it sure was. It even kickstarted the online multiplayer tournaments that have become so big in the industry nowadays. Even visually, Quake 2 made a mark on the FPS genre by using detailed 3D graphics, which could be further enhanced through hardware acceleration. It might seem trivial now, with the modern NVIDIA and AMD GPUs pumping out more power than 4 steam engines tied together. But back then, this paved the way for a whole new way to approach first-person gaming. No more pixelated gunshots, only beautiful high-definition gore. ID Software sure knew how to blow it out of the park. Get it? No? Moving on. Dino Crisis 2, 2000. Next on the list is Dino Crisis 2, a survival horror released in 2000. Developer Capcom knew players liked guns and also dinosaurs, so why not combine them? That's exactly what happens as you follow Agents Regina and Dylan as they're sent to a prehistoric island to rescue survivors and collect data on the third energy experiments. You clear various levels, all while solving puzzles and shooting dinosaurs charging toward you. Sounds exciting? Well, there's also a Colosseum mode where you can fight endless hordes of dinosaurs. You know, just in case you didn't get enough of dinosaurs already. Like many other games on the list, Dino Crisis 2 uses pre-rendered 2D backgrounds and 3D character models. Although the camera is dynamic, like in Resident Evil 2, the environments are varied and interesting enough to keep the players hooked. From crumbling facilities to dense forests, you'll find something interesting everywhere. Oh, and also dinosaurs. Lots of dinosaurs. So, fasten your shoelaces and reload your trusty sidearm because you're going to have to run and shoot a lot, often at the same time. Vagrant Story, 2000. Now, here's a classic RPG with a solid adventure factor. Vagrant Story, released in 2000 by Square Enix, puts you in the boots of a risk breaker known as Ashley Riot. Your mission? Investigate a cult's plot within the ominous city of Leia Monde. The game's narrative is delivered through gripping dialogue, unveiling dark secrets about both the city as well as the protagonist's past. The gameplay puts emphasis on smart weapon customization, puzzle solving, and chaining together melee combos. There's also a risk system where the player's choices impact the ending of the story. This is quite a common occurrence now, but back then it was revolutionary. As for the visuals, the city of Leia Monde is extremely intriguing to explore, thanks to a smart usage of lights and shadows. The gothic aesthetic is truly brought to life. The characters are detailed as well, with clear models and armor designs. Overall, Vagrant Story remains a classic to this day for its gripping storytelling and extremely immersive environments. Oddworld, Abe's Oddysee, 1997. It's time for a classic platform adventure game. Oddworld, Abe's Oddysee, released in 1997, is a game about Abe, a slave laborer at Rupture Farms, a meat processing factory. Abe finds out that the factory intends to turn its workers into a new meat product. To stop this horrible ploy, Abe, aka the player, has to escape the factory and save his fellow workers. The gameplay primarily involves stealth, platforming, and puzzle solving. An interesting feature is Abe's powers to possess and control other creatures, making for some very interesting moments and puzzle solutions. As for the visuals, the game showcased some very impressive 2D graphics. Abe's comical expressions too were captured in clear detail. The industrial environments were well designed and truly had a dark humor vibe throughout. Oh, and the grotesque and malformed enemies were always fun to come across. Oddworld, Abe's Oddysee had many sequels made over the years, but this remains one for the books for a good reason. Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare, 2001. Another survival horror on the list. They sure made a lot of these, eh? Alone in the Dark, the new nightmare, released in 2001, is a third-person survival horror game. You switch between two characters, Edward Carnby and Aline Sedrak, investigating the mysterious Shadow Island. If government conspiracies, supernatural creatures and ancient artifacts are your thing, then Alone in the Dark is perfect for you. The gameplay combines exploration, puzzle solving, and combat as players navigate eerie environments, battling horrifying monsters using various weapons. The game also has you use a flashlight, not just to light your path, but in combat as well. The game puts emphasis on the atmosphere and environment, which is vital to a survival horror experience. Detailed 3D textures, paired with great lighting, made for a memorable experience. Be it in a haunted mansion or a deep, lush forest, Alone in the Dark spared no effort when it came to visuals. Yet another title to employ the dynamic camera angles, this was a much more grounded, albeit supernatural experience that captured the essence of the genre perfectly. R4 Ridge Racer Type 4, 1998. Here's another racer for the speed enthusiasts out there. R4 Ridge Racer Type 4, released in 1998, is an arcade racer focused primarily on gameplay. You pick one of 4 teams, each with its own unique storyline, and compete on various racetracks to conclude the campaign. The driving is heavily focused on drifting, especially to get out of corners without losing much momentum. It's super satisfying to pull off a perfect drift and overtake your opponent, leaving the corner in the lead position. The fast-paced electronic soundtrack accentuates the adrenaline-fueled arcade racing perfectly. I'm sensing a trend here. Onto the visuals. There's really nothing much to say here, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Where the game doesn't revolutionize anything graphically, it sure excels in what it does. Utilizing the power of the PlayStation system to its fullest, Ridge Racer ensures smooth frame rates, even when the screen is packed with other cars at the starting line. So, if a classic, fast-paced arcade is what you're looking for, R4 is the way to go. Future Cop LAPD, 1998. Ever wonder what would happen if you paired Transformers with GTA? Well, Future Cop LAPD is the answer. Developed by Visceral Games and Electronic Arts, this third-person vehicular combat game puts you in the shoes of a police officer patrolling the crime-ridden streets of Los Angeles. What makes it cool? Well, your police vehicle can turn into a fully weaponized mech called X1 Alpha. Players can toggle between hoverbike and mech form to tackle various combat scenarios strategically. The futuristic and dystopian city of LA is brought to life with the use of advanced 3D graphics. Other effects like screen shake and particle scattering caused every explosion to be realized in exciting detail. Despite all the action, it maintains a stable frame rate throughout, allowing for a fluid combat and traversal experience. Driver 2, 2000. Driver 2 is an action-adventure game. You play as Tanner, an undercover cop in pursuit of a mobster. The game lets people explore many dynamic environments set in real-life cities like Chicago, Havana, Las Vegas, and Rio de Janeiro. Although the game lets you walk around and engage in activities on foot, the main focus lies on vehicular gameplay. From high-speed chases to stealthy surveillance and tailing missions, your car is your best friend. The game features a day-night cycle, which, when combined with the well-realized city environments, makes for a very engaging experience. The lighting especially comes to life at night, when the sprawling cities are bright and full of crime for you to take care of. Driver 2 is a prime example that you don't need advanced acting and dialogue to tell a simple yet engaging story. Street Fighter Alpha 3, 1998. Now, we've mentioned Tekken earlier, so it's only fair we talk about its age-old rival, Street Fighter. Capcom's Street Fighter Alpha 3, released in 1998, is a 2D fighting game where the player can choose from a large roster of characters. Each character has their own rivalry and storyline, and the player uncovers the same on their way to the World Warrior Tournament. Players can choose from various gameplay modes, including Arcade, Versus, and World Tour, which adds depth to the experience. The flashy and vibrant visual palette of Street Fighter Alpha 3 made it a joy to play. Even the special effects from the various unique combos and EX attacks were a sight to behold, and truly satisfying to end a match with. The game even takes us through various locations, as seen in the different backgrounds, which mixes up the whole experience of a compact, closed-screen fighter. On top of that, the character designs and outfits are designed meticulously, so the player can have favorites across the roster in both gameplay and aesthetics. Don't just pick Kain and Ryu like we did, explore a little. The Legend of Dragoon, 1999. So, we've covered racing, fighting. How about another RPG? The Legend of Dragoon is an RPG developed by Sony in 1999. Here, you take on the role of Dart, a young hero who's on the path to avenge his parents' death, while also looking for his childhood friend, Shana, who has mysteriously disappeared. The game features a rich and intricate storyline, filled with magical creatures, ancient legends, and political intrigue. The turn-based combat system also has quick time elements, where certain attacks can be enhanced just by timing them right. On top of all that, the game lets you transform into different Dragoon forms, taking on their elemental magic during epic battles. When it comes to visuals, The Legend of Dragoon showcases impressive 3D polygonal character models and pre-rendered backgrounds that were cutting edge for its time. The highlight would be the smooth and exciting Dragoon transformations, which truly felt like a transference of power and might. The world of endiness is also quite varied, contributing to the game's immersion through well-designed locations to explore. Soul Blade, 1995. Well, yet another fighting game. Soul Blade, released in 1995, is the predecessor to the long-running Soul Calibur series. Set in the 16th century, it revolves around a cursed sword, Soul Edge, and various warriors' quests to possess or destroy it. Like the aforementioned fighting games, the player chooses from a roster of characters and fights their way through their campaigns. But unlike Street Fighter or Tekken, the focus here is not on hand-to-hand combat, but on weapons instead. Each character comes with a unique weapon and combat stat to fit the player's style perfectly. The game boasts impressive 3D graphics for its time. Character models are well detailed and showcase distinctive designs, with their weapons and armor adding to the visual variety. The backgrounds are varied and contribute to the dark vibe of the game, which is quite contradictory to that of Street Fighter Alpha 3. The special moves of each character and the character designs are all done intricately. It's no wonder that this kickstarted a multi-generational franchise, which is coming out with new titles even today. Castlevania Symphony of the Night, 1997. Up next is one of our favorite Metroidvania RPGs of all time. Castlevania Symphony of the Night, released in 1997, follows the story of the son of Dracula, Alucard. Your goal is to stop your evil father from being resurrected by traversing through Dracula's massive castle. Players navigate a sprawling, interconnected world, acquiring new abilities and equipment to access previously unreachable areas. Combat involves both melee and magic abilities and also a tactical soul system, where you can harness and use different enemy abilities. Now, despite being a 2D game, the visuals and atmosphere are remarkable. The gothic design of the castle is amazingly detailed, and the enemies are quite varied as well. In fact, every stage you go through, from the ornate castle halls to the dingy catacombs, is an atmospheric masterpiece. The dynamic lighting and flashy combat effects are cheery on top of an already beautifully dark aesthetic. Did you know Alucard is just Dracula spelled backwards? Well, I was older than I'd like to admit till I figured it out myself. Moving on. Final Fantasy VII, 1997. How can we make a list of legendary games and not mention one of the greatest RPG series to ever exist? Final Fantasy VII, released in 1997, is hailed as the greatest game in the long-running Final Fantasy series by developer Square Enix. It even got a complete remake a few years ago, which, again, was extremely well received by the new generation of gamers. But let's talk about the original here. Set in the dystopian industrial world of Gaia, players step into the boots of Cloud Strife, an ex-soldier, and a group of rebels known as Avalanche, as they attempt to thwart the evil Shinra Corporation's plans to exploit the planet's life force. The turn-based combat system is accentuated by the use of materia, which lets the players wield various magical abilities. What sets this RPG apart was the use of 3D pre-rendered backgrounds, unlike most other 2D static backgrounds at the time. The dystopian cityscapes of Gaia are wonderfully realized, with a perfect mix of wonder during the daytime and dread during the night. The use of smart lighting and shadows was a true push for the hardware available back then. The character models too, from the protagonist Cloud's massive sword to Sephiroth's menacing and cold eyes, were all brilliantly designed. Honestly, I could go on for days about why Final Fantasy VII is as great as it is, but let's move on to the next title for now. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, 2000. Let's step away from the dark and dystopian for a bit and take a look at the super fun third-person skater, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. Released in 2000, the game doesn't waste time trying to weave an intricate plot. It's just you and your trusty skateboard and a whole bunch of arenas to grind and flip your way through. It's absolutely thrilling when you successfully land a triple front flip after a high-speed ramp takeoff. The game does a great job of making the skateboarding feel realistic. There's a certain weight and momentum to the character, which adds to the whole experience perfectly. The various arenas are fun to explore and keep things entertaining thanks to the impressive 3D graphics of the world around you. Gran Turismo 2, 1999. Next on the list is arguably the father of the racing simulator genre, Gran Turismo 2. Released in 1999, the game boasted a pure car racing experience with an emphasis on realism in both setting and driving experience. The cars handle realistically for the time, and careful driving is rewarded. This is as far as it can get from an arcade racer. The players start with a moderate amount of money and participate in various races across different tracks to make enough to buy that shiny new ride. The car models were amazing for the time, and environments ranged from urban streets to race circuits, each with intricate textures and dynamic lighting effects. To add to all that, there was a dynamic weather system, a day-night cycle, and a certain randomization of conditions that kept the experience fresh, even after many hours of playing. Even today, Gran Turismo is known for its ultra-realism in both graphics as well as gameplay. Parasite Eve 2, 2000. Up next, we have Parasite Eve 2. This sequel, released in 2000, follows the story of NYPD officer Aya Bray, who has mitochondrial powers. A survival horror RPG at its core, the game features a real-time combat system with supernatural powers enabled through its parasite energy system. The plot is a dark tale of mutants and criminal organizations plaguing the city of Los Angeles. Players must explore various locations while solving puzzles and battling grotesque mutated creatures. The character models here are quite impressive. The protagonist is rendered with great 3D textures and even changes outfits throughout the game, which are all equally detailed. The enemies, arguably, are the highlight here. Each detail of the convoluted creatures and mutants is captured perfectly, enhanced by the dynamic shadow system. As the player explores the various locations, from eerie catacombs to dark city streets, it's clear that the developers wanted to make the visuals the highlight of this survival horror experience. Einhander, 1997. What would happen if one were to combine Nier Automata's dynamic flight combat with Wolfenstein's dystopian setting? Well, Einhander, the 1997 sci-fi side-scroller, is what? This 1997 game is a fast-paced action game set in a dystopian future. The players control upgradable flight units, which can transform based on the situational requirement. Another interesting feature is the ability of the player to seize and use weapons from enemies. This really mixes up the gameplay and keeps every encounter fresh. The visuals are very impressive, with a smooth frame rate and dynamic camera changing up the stages seamlessly. The cyberpunk-inspired backgrounds tell a story as well, while you blast away with the arsenal of weapons at your disposal. The spacecraft designs are unique and visually impressive, while the game's environments range from futuristic cityscapes to outer space battles, each with a distinct and captivating aesthetic. When it comes to spacecraft shooters, very few games since have taken just one combat element and honed it to perfection in a single game. Mega Man Legends, 1998. Up next is Mega Man Legends, a 1998 action-adventure game where players control Mega Man Volnut, a digger exploring an expansive post-apocalyptic world filled with ancient technology and ruins. The goal? Find the hidden treasure known simply as the Mother Lode. In this third-person shooter, players use Mega Man's trusty blasters to combat a wide array of enemies and machines. There's an interesting roster of NPCs who help you along your way, building relations and moving the plot forward. Its unique 3D graphics are charming and captures the whole vibe of this futuristic treasure hunt quite well. This is the first game in the series to move to a 3D character and environment design. The game's visuals feature a vibrant, cel-shaded style that adds a charming, cartoonish quality to the characters and world. Players traverse through underground ruins, dystopian cities, and wild islands across their journey. The visuals are super crisp, and the performance remains stable throughout. Chrono Cross, 2000. We're nearing the end of the list here. Up next is Chrono Cross, released in 2000. This fantasy RPG puts you in the armored boots of Surge. Lost in a parallel dimension, he embarks on a quest to unravel the mysteries of the parallel world, facing a diverse cast of characters, each with their own motives and interconnected stories. The story is surprisingly complex, exploring themes of identity, destiny, and the inevitability of time and nature. The game even features a complex turn-based combat system and a storyline that branches out based on the player's choices. The game features a vibrant hand-drawn aesthetic with detailed backgrounds that bring the diverse locations to life. Although the character models can be a little pixelated, especially during motion, the environments are taken straight out of a fairy tale picture book. Each location feels magical and alive, with detailed waterfalls and white marble cities. It's an absolute visual treat from start to finish. Ace Combat 3 Electrosphere, 1999. And to round up today's list, we have Ace Combat 3 Electrosphere from Namco's flagship aerial combat series. The game is set in a futuristic world where players assume the role of Nemo, a pilot caught in a global conflict between multinational corporations. The choices made by the player play a major role in where the story goes, which is impressive for a game focused primarily on dogfights. Speaking of dogfights, Ace Combat 3 was an absolute pioneer, putting real-life fighter jets from around the world into the player's hands, each with their own feel and loadout of weaponry. The visuals comprised mixed 3D and 2D models, with 3D being used for the planes and 2D for the ground below. What's impressive is how the tail and wings of the different aircraft reacted to the player's inputs, turning in realistic ways based on direction and altitude. The combat itself was exciting, with missiles leaving behind a definitive smoke trail and concluding in a satisfying explosion against the enemy fighter. Ace Combat 3 Electrosphere captures the thrill of high-speed aerial combat perfectly and improves upon it in the years to come with future titles. And that concludes our pick for the 30 graphically impressive PlayStation games that were way ahead of their time. Do you agree with the titles that made the list? Or have we left out some of your favorites? Let us know in the comments below. Who knows? Your picks could be featured in the next list. To stay up to date with all things gaming, subscribe to Marvelous Games. See you next time.